the Elsewhere. Score your name with a school compass into a wooden desk, then gawp through a classroom window, fixing your sights on a tree or a barn wall in silhouette on the far rig. Rivers in towns like this are what you'd expect. Insolvent, edged out, skulking past wheezing mills and padlocked yards, alder and willow up to their knees washing their grimy clothes against flat rocks. You can cross, a coin in the ferryman's palm, but you can't return. Your soul always at large on the other side, fine-tuning the snares and traps, pockets pouched with the velvety pelts of skinned mice, hands lifting and parting the pubic cocoon of a wren's nest, bareback riding a mad-eyed bronco through howitzer rain, camped in the fork of a tree, prospecting fields with a kestrel's eye. What was it you scribbled? All our futures behind us, something like that. Every summit and peak zip-wired back to a single lightning-stunned oak on the other half of the valley, acorn nursed in a badger's skull. It's impossible for me not to be aware of Hughes as a presence of, as somebody who I've followed in lots of different ways. I mean, even if I go right back to the beginning and I think about when I started writing and why I started writing, his poems woke me up to poetry. They set the standard of poetry, but there was a local connection. He was the man from the next valley. And I think there was always a sense in my mind that if he could do it, coming from there, growing up in a very similar house to my house, why couldn't I do it? We don't share the same concerns or styles or subjects, but nevertheless, he made all this possible for me. Yeah, it's always just been a privilege to spend time with his work, and writing new poems about him and his work is just an extension of that privilege. So I was commissioned to write 2 new poems vaguely on the subject of Ted Hughes and his experience, upbringing, background in South Yorkshire. It's the lesser known part of Hughes's backstory, but is becoming more well known, and there are sort of strong links now established between this part of the world and some of his best known poems. It's not an easy commission, trailing along in Ted's footprints. I knew that I didn't want to write about him. There's been plenty said about Ted in the past, but I spent some time here looking around this building where he went to school, and thinking really, in the first instance anyway, about Ted living till the age of 7 or 8 in West Yorkshire, in a small town where he'd pretty much be able to walk out of the front door and very quickly be in wooded valleys and up on the hills and the moors. Mexborough, it's not as if it's sort of New York City or anything like that, but by comparison, it is a more industrialised environment and a less rural one. And I just imagined that he would have been hunting for a space here, a location, to replicate those adventures that he'd been having as a boy in West Yorkshire, and seemed to find that on the other side of the river, up in Old Dennerby. And in one of the poems, The Elsewhere, I imagine him looking out of the window of the school here and setting his sights pinning his hopes on that countryside, across the river, and then the journey that he needed to take to get there, and then the idea that, once you've set your soul free in that landscape, it never particularly rejoins you. The other poem, Paperboy, came out of being shown around Mexborough and what is now established as a sort of reconstruction of Ted Hughes's paper round. His parents, when they moved here, took a newsagent shop. And although we're different generations, I was thinking of the paper round as that rite of passage that a lot of boys and girls go through into the world of work and graft, and I think all of us who had a paper round, blame our wonky spines on the Friday evening paper with the supplement in there that we could barely lift, and also that initiation into, for a morning paper round anyway, the world before it belongs to everybody else. There's something very particular. Something that you can almost own in the early morning when it's just you out there in the world. It made me think of Hughes's poem Cock Crows, where he describes this great conflagration of dawn from the top of the hill. And I was thinking about my own paper round out of the village of Marsden, where I grew up, in a morning, and arriving at the top of the hill to meet the sun as the sun was coming up. And I guess in that sense, theoretically, imaginatively following in Hughes's footsteps, just in the sense that, he'd had a paper round and presumably experienced some of those similar feelings and sensations, and got a little look into people's private lives through the letterboxes, whether you wanted it or not. Paperboy. It was hard slog for buttons and magic beans, the dead weight of the bag on the shoulder, a bloodless soldier lugging him home. In rain, the canvas tacky and smelling of boiled meat, comic strip mongrels grinding their teeth behind bolted doors, the Yorkshire Post seasoned with black pepper, my hand in the shredder. The road was a westward vertical takeoff out of the village, the day not kindled yet. Blobs of pink flesh behind frosted glass in bathroom windows. A goon squad crow tearing at squashed fur up ahead on the road. 13 and living a peep show life. Once I saw what's-his-name auto-filleting in letterbox format in front of the fire, and a horse in a pantry, its fat arse. The last house always half a mile more uphill after the back-to-backs and the council estate and the turning circle. Always a barn conversion or pimped-up weaver's cottage. The sun rolled in the telegraph, lobbed in the porch. Fetch it yoursen. The trick was to overshoot, hang the spent sack on a fence and walk to the top of the hill. Inky hands washed in the dew, cockerels blaring, their heads in flame, the world still yawning and mine to steal. Face east and take the first bite of the dawn. Sit on the throne and try on the gold crown.